The Viking Age. The golden era of warriors who emerged from the icy fjords of the north and struck relentless fear into the heart of Europe. For them, death was not a dark end to be avoided. On the contrary, it was the only gate opening to Odin's glorious halls, Valhalla. The greatest honor for a Viking was to take his last breath with his sword in hand, shedding blood on the battlefield. However, history is much more complex and brutal than the legends tell. Not all of those mighty Nordic leaders who carved their names in blood on rune stones and brought kingdoms to their knees died on the battlefield. Some passed away by betrayal in dark dungeons, some by relentless diseases in their beds, and some in surprisingly ordinary ways. What were the truths behind the legends? What did those supposedly invincible conquerors feel as they took their last breath? Today, we are lifting the veil of mist behind the deaths of history's greatest Viking leaders. At the top of our list is a name where legends and reality intertwine: Ragnar Lothbrok. The death of this legendary figure who besieged Paris and brought terror to England was just as dramatic as his life. According to Norwegian and Icelandic sagas, Ragnar, due to his extreme arrogance, attempted to conquer England with only 2 ships and became a prisoner of King Ella of Northumbria. King Ella didn't just want to kill this terrifying enemy simply. He prepared the most painful and humiliating end for him. Ragnar was thrown into a bottomless pit swarming with venomous snakes. It is told that while the snakes in the pit bit his flesh, Ragnar didn't writhe in pain, but recited his final poem with a mocking smile on his face. With his eyes set on Valhalla, Ragnar did not fear death. According to the legend, his last words, referring to his sons who would avenge him, were, "How the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers." Even today, historians debate whether Ragnar was a single person or an amalgamation of multiple legendary warriors. However, the Snake Pit story perfectly encapsulates the Viking belief in an honorable death and revenge. Ragnar's prophecy soon came true. Leading the great heathen army that descended on England to avenge their father was the smartest and most ruthless of the brothers, Ivar the Boneless. Said to have a physical condition and unable to stand on his own feet, Ivar led the masses not with muscle power, but with his terrifying intellect and strategic genius. He personally ordered the horrifying torture known as the Blood Eagle for King Ila. Toppling the kingdoms of England one by one, Ivar unexpectedly changed his course to Dublin, Ireland. So, did this invincible strategist fall by the sword of a massive warrior on the battlefield? No. Irish and Anglo-Saxon chronicles record Ivar's death in a remarkably ordinary, even sorrowful way. When the year was 873, the most feared man of the north in Britain succumbed to a sudden severe illness in Dublin. Some historians believe that his congenital bone disease, osteogenesis imperfecta, progressed and caused his heart or internal organs to fail. Christian monks recorded his death in their ledgers as God's punishment with a wicked disease. Leaving behind a blood-soaked England, Ivar breathed his last silently in his own bed. The fate of Björn Ironside, another famous son of Ragnar, took a very different path than his brothers. He set his sights not on misty and cold England, but on the warm, rich, and unknown Mediterranean. Björn's intellect was at least as sharp as Ivar's. When he besieged a strongly fortified city named Luni on the Italian coast, mistaking it for Rome, he realized he couldn't take it by force. So, he faked his death, claimed he had become a Christian and wanted to be baptized on his deathbed, and entered the city in a coffin. Bursting out of the coffin with his sword, Björn opened the gates from the inside and sacked the city. Returning from this massive Mediterranean expedition with legendary wealth, Björn settled in Sweden and founded the Munso dynasty. Unlike many Viking warriors, the final years of his life were not spent in the blood and sweat of battlefields, but in great wealth, power, and prestige. According to legends, Björn died peacefully of natural causes as an old man in his bed in Sweden. The massive burial mound named Björnshogen, believed to be his tomb, can still be visited in Sweden today. Even though he didn't die fighting, he managed to etch his name into eternity with his achievements. Rollo, who ravaged the coasts of France, was so massive that no horse could carry him. Therefore, they called him Rollo the Walker. The Frankish king realized that the only way to stop his endless raids was to grant him land. Rollo settled in the lands given to him in northern France and laid the foundations of the region we know today as Normandy, land of the Northmen. As part of the treaty, Rollo was baptized and converted to Christianity. However, his death witnessed a crisis of faith as complex as his life. In the 930s, living his final days in his bed as a very old man, his mind began to slip. According to the horrified accounts of Christian historians, as Rollo was drawing his last breath, he donated kilos of gold to monasteries and churches to save his soul. But he didn't want to leave things to chance. Not wanting to anger his old gods on the very same day, he had 100 captives slaughtered and sacrificed to Odin in hopes of being accepted into Valhalla. Rollo was buried as a Christian duke, but died as a fierce pagan in his heart. If there was anyone who literally deserved to go to Valhalla, it was Erik, nicknamed Bloodaxe. Erik, who slaughtered his own brothers without blinking an eye to seize the Norwegian throne, was so ruthless and difficult to rule that he was eventually driven out by his own people. He was more of a raider who couldn't stop shedding blood than a king. In England, he became the King of Northumbria, but peace was not for him. In 954, this man, the nightmare of the Western world, was cornered at the Battle of Stainmoor. According to legend, Erik and his most loyal warriors were ambushed by a massive army. Instead of fleeing, they did what a Viking must do. They drew their weapons and charged towards death. Despite being heavily outnumbered, they took hundreds of enemies down with them where they fell. Erik Bloodaxe died covered in blood on the battlefield, sword in hand, exactly as the gods he believed in expected of him. From snake-filled pits to arrows of betrayal, from diseases in unknown lands to ordinary horse accidents, even the invincible lords of Scandinavian legends could not escape the creative and cruel arms of death. Their deaths were at least as striking as the lives they lived. Whether Valhalla accepted them or not is unknown, but it is certain that they carved their names into history. The sagas of these legendary warriors are far from over. We've only scratched the surface of Valhalla's calling. To witness the final fate of the remaining Viking kings, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for part 2. You won't want to miss it.